And welcome to the second talk on some of the plays that we've been doing on the Lost Ladies Found channel. This one's on Getrude L. Robins and Florence Henrietta Darwin. We don't actually know too much about either of them, so that's why I've kind of lumped them together. But it's an extraordinary period when you think about it in English playwriting history, between 1908 and probably 1913, when these two plays were first written and the Robins plays were performed. The Darwin plays probably weren't performed, but we have, and if they were, it was probably by amateurs. So this is probably, well, certainly the only recording of that particular play that you'll see. Now, I spoke a bit about Getrude L. Robins on the main introduction, but I'll repeat it here for those that haven't seen that. I mean, Gertrude is what we call a true lost lady, because believe it or not, there were three women in this short period of time, all called Robins and all writing plays. So we have Elizabeth Robins, who wrote a very famous play called Votes for Women. She was also an actress, and so was Getrude L. Robins, the L standing for Louisa. But believe it or not, there was another Gertrude Robins around at that particular time called Getrude M. Robins, and she was writing plays. And what's happened to Gertrude Louisa is that her plays have been filed under the name of Getrude M. Robins. To make it even more confusing, Getrude M. Robins married, and her books and plays were then filed under her married name, which was Mrs. L.B. Reynolds, Mrs. Bailey Reynolds sometimes, which wasn't even her name, that was her husband's name, and she took it on. If you don't believe me, I'll try and screen share something for you. Yeah, there we go, look. And you should be able to see on the screen there, I use the thing, can you see Reynolds M and Getrude Robins above? Well, the Getrude Robins above is Getrude L. Robins. This one here has nothing to do with her, and this Mrs. L.B. Reynolds certainly has nothing to do with her. So I'll stop screen sharing. Yeah, now, again, the makeshift realities we'll deal with first. And actually, if you want to learn more, we did actually have a Q&A at the end of the performances, the live performance of makeshifts and realities, and I forgot to turn the camera off, but we left it there on the channel, so if you do watch the plays, you'll be able to watch the Q&A and see what people said at the end and the questions that they asked. I think I'll begin with the Q&A, because in the Q&A somebody said that these are the first kitchen sink dramas, and I think, you know, that's a good observation. Sort of 50 years before John Osborne, these particular plays were dealing with domestic issues and working class characters. I mean, it's quite remarkable in realities, for example, when you see a man doing all the domestic chores. So there is a kitchen sink, but there's a man at it, and not only is he sort of clearing his own plates away and things like that, but he's looking after the baby, quite happily going up and looking after the baby, which is things, of course, at that particular period that men never did. Now, I'm saying working class, but actually the group of people that she's depicting within the play are more sort of lower middle class. And there's a couple of clues in the script of this, because there's a canary in the cage. That's what it says in the script, that there's a canary in the cage. Not something that we could put on Zoom, probably not even on stage without getting animal rights after us and things. But it gives a really nice picture of this kind of genteel poverty. And my goodness, the first 2 or 3 pages of makeshifts are almost entirely about the economics and the price of coal. Have divvies from the co-op at the end of the month, having to wait for that, taking in a lodger because they can't afford the rent and so on. And she's very specific with the prices, which the audience would also know, and the audience will also be going through those particular situations as well at that particular time. The other thing that's in the script, which is quite cheeky of Gertrude Louisa Robins, is that Caroline's costume is purple, green, and white. And you think, well, that's a bit strange, you know, putting in this kind of purple, green, and white costume. What's that all about? Well, it's when you then find out that the suffragette movement adopted those very colours in 1908, and 1908 is when, of course, makeshifts was first presented. Now, it's got an interesting history because it was presented by Miss Horniman in Manchester and Manchester, England. And Miss Horniman is quite important in British theatre terms because she was the first person to set up a repertory company in Great Britain. And the actors who worked there had sort of full-time jobs for 40 weeks of the year. So she had an inheritance, and she bought the Gaiety Theatre in Manchester, and then opened this rep theatre in 1908. And in the opening season, she asked Gertrude Robins, as I said, who was an actor, probably in the same company, to write these short plays as kind of literal curtain raisers for things like Shaw and Ibsen. And so Gertrude came up trumps, and the plays themselves, as you'll see on the YouTube channel, if you watch them, they're literally 30 minutes each. So she was writing to order. You know, small casts has to be 30 minutes, and they come in almost exactly at 30 minutes. Makeshifts, we know, was very, very popular. Gertrude Robins herself said that it played for over 1,000 performances, and that would have been worldwide in the so-called colonies at that particular time, as well as in Britain. It's so popular that when Miss Horniman did a refit on the Gaiety Theatre in 1912, she asked Gertrude to write a follow-up to Makeshifts, which became the play Realities, which again you can see the pair of them together as the story continues. It's a very sad story. Somebody said it's Chekhovian. Well, yeah, you know, kind of yearning for Moscow, yearning for a husband. I suppose that's, you know, that would be the link. Except that, you know, Gertrude's not copying here. She certainly would have known Chekhov, because Chekhov was first performed in English in the UK in 1925, which was kind of long after she was dead, actually, and certainly long after she wrote these plays. In their own time, I'm just going on to my screen there, because in their own time they were really well received. The Manchester Guardian, which is the present day Guardian, called Makeshifts a grand old comedy, authentic, convincing and sincere, full of understanding and sympathy. And then when Realities was added, it was said a veritable gem. Its distinction will linger with playgoers for a long time to come. Well, unfortunately, of course, they didn't linger for a long time to come, and probably the recording on YouTube is the first time that they've been seen for over 100 years. I'll move on to Florence Henrietta Darwin. She's again a very interesting character who we don't know much about. What we do know is she married Charles Darwin's son, which is where she's got that surname Darwin. Charles Darwin was her father-in-law. She was also first cousin to Virginia Woolf. And that in itself is interesting, because the pair of them, the cousins, were related to Julia Margaret Cameron, certainly in my opinion the greatest photographer that's ever lived. And you can see Julia Margaret Cameron's photographs in art galleries all over the world, and quite rightly, they're incredible. And one of the most famous Julia Margaret Cameron photographs was called John the Baptist. I'm sure most people will have seen it. If not, you can look it up on YouTube. That was, in fact, Florence Henrietta Darwin, our playwright, when she was a little girl. Her aunt Julia used her as a muse. So not only will you see Florence Henrietta Darwin as a kind of kid in John the Baptist, you'll see her in many photographs that Julia Margaret Cameron shot. The other thing we know is that she lived in Gloucestershire from 1909 her husband had died, so she moved to a house that he had down in Gloucestershire, and she lived there until she died in 1920. Thankfully, the folklorist Cecil Sharp put together a volume of her plays and published it himself in 1921, which is how we're able to present her play The New Year for you on our YouTube channel. Without him, of course, they probably wouldn't exist. Somebody would have thrown them away or something. And yet again, they're extraordinary pieces because they're sort of plays that we don't really see these days, that they're to do with a part of England that most people wouldn't know about, which is Gloucestershire. The accent they certainly wouldn't really understand, but it's the fables, the link that these characters have with both animals and the land, and it's kind of based on the dialogue rather than the action within it. And the dialogue, of course, is poetic, and it's fantastic the way that they put across their emotions and feelings and so on, just by the sounds of words as opposed to the content of the words. So again, strangely enough, there is a kind of feminist thread running through it, and it's with May. You notice that May has run away from her husband 12 years previously, and then is returning, and actually, of course, on the day that her husband is getting married to someone else, because he thinks that she's dead. But I'll just point out, and I won't do the accent, and it's quite hard to read it without doing the accent, but anyway, this is what May explains why she ran away. She says, "When I was tied up to Steve," which is the husband, "'twas as if they had got I shut in a box. 'Twas the bridle on my head and the bit in the mouth of I, and to be held in where once I had gone free. And I turned wild, for the very birds seemed to be calling I from the hedges to come out along a they, and the berries tossing in the wind, and the leaves blowing away quick from where they'd stuck all summer. All of it spoke to I, and stirred I powerful, so that one morning when the sun was up and the breeze running, I comed out into the air and shut the door behind I." It's beautiful language, isn't it? I mean, I know obviously I've mangled it there, but as I normally do. But nonetheless, quite extraordinary language. And then towards the end, in fact, almost the last thing that's said is by the mother, Vashti, about her child. And she says, and she blames the populace, the local populace of the village, the kind of incestuous rural community, for what happens to May. And she says, "Over the bended necks of you my child shall pass, for you be done to death by the lies which growed within you and waxed till the bodies of you was fed with them, and the poison did gush out from your lips. But my little child stood in the light, and the hands of hers was about the stars." So again, okay, so I mean, they're just two very quick sort of rundowns of the three plays. The next one that we'll be doing will be Francis Sheridan's The Dupe, written in 1762, performed in 1763. She was the mother of Richard Brinsley Sheridan, the famous Richard Brinsley Sheridan, and he stole a lot of his ideas, characters, plots, etc., from his own mother and from other people. But you'll have to tune in to watch the Dupe, and I'll do another talk on that in a few weeks' time. Thank you very much for listening.